Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and you listen to another podcast. And basically what I want to talk about today is culture. I was just really reflecting on sort of culture and meaning and words over the last week. And part of it's because I've been learning a lot about programming. So some of you have been following me just in general, probably know that I've been training to become a web developer. And I actually now have another podcast with Development 101, where we're kind of talking about that journey. And it's been very interesting. It's not like I'm new to programming. I've dabbled in C++ and HTML and CSS over the last couple decades. But now I'm doing a real deep dive, really kind of getting into the weeds. And I was just reflecting on the concept of a pointer, and it kind of made me think about words and language, because a lot of people, for whatever reason, were really talking about gender identity, and what does it mean to be a man and a woman and all this kind of stuff. And so I started reflecting on it as words, as pointers. Okay, so to understand, in programming, one of the big issues, especially if you're talking about sort of more what's called a low-level programming language, which means you're getting closer to sort of the actual communicating with the machine, one of the big issues is you have to manage memory. Okay, so your computer has all these little slots of memory where information is stored, and you only have so many of them. So your code can't go too nuts with how many it uses, and also needs to know where the right information is stored. So when you create a variable in a programming language, you are basically giving a name to a very particular slot of memory, and then every time you put information in it, it replaces the information that was there before. That's called assignment. So if I create a new variable and I assign the number 1 to it, I go look inside that little memory hole, there's 1. And then later on, if I say that variable now equals 2, I go in there, 1 is gone, now it's just 2. Cool. So now the 1 is gone to never be seen again. Now, a pointer, on the other hand, you're not giving a name to a particular hole or whatnot. What you do is you're giving a name that stores an address. Okay? So you have a variable that's not storing information, it's storing an address to point you to another memory slot where the information you're looking for is. Okay? Which is really interesting, because if I were to change, so for example, if I changed a pointer to point to a memory address where the number 1 is stored, and then I changed it to an address to where the number 2 is stored, the number 1 is still in that other memory address. Okay, so the point is changing the value that it points to, because you're changing an address, not the actual information in the memory slot, doesn't mean that the other thing doesn't exist anymore. Okay, and I was just applying this concept to language, in the sense that a word isn't like a memory slot. It isn't a variable. When a word changes meanings, it doesn't mean that the previous meaning no longer exists. It just might be, it's still there. So in the sense that the words sex and gender used to kind of refer to the same concept, of sort of biological sex, in the sense that based on the organs and biology that you were born with, are you categorically a male or female in the spectrum of sort of biological design. Okay? And the reason why that matters is for medical reasons, for other types of reasons. But over time, as the concept, and I think this is a sign of a better world, in the sense that we're living in a world where basically, our sole focus isn't substance. Our focus isn't just putting food on the table at the end of the day. We're now, more focused than ever than just saying, like, what is it that each of us want to live a life that makes us happy? Okay, and that's a sign of growth and wealth of a nation. This is a good thing. And that raises all these conversations about how do you spend your leisure time? Or what is it that makes myself happy? How do I want to live my life? Okay, so basically you now have this situation where there are people who it's not an issue of necessarily biological sex, and I think this is what the confusion is, and this is why I'm bringing up the programming analogy. So now when people are talking about gender, they're no longer referring to that idea of biological sex, okay? nowadays the words, so imagine that the idea of biological sex hasn't disappeared. That concept hasn't changed, okay? There's still biological males and biological females, okay? That hasn't changed, but the word gender now points to a different concept, oftentimes to the concept of gender identity, which isn't about biology, but more about, again, identity, meaning basically how do I present myself? How do I feel most comfortable in my own shoes? And I think it's this sort of subtlety in the sense that the difference between sort of redefining the concept that a word points to versus eliminating a concept is where a lot of the cultural sort of clash comes in. Where people who are sort of more conservative, it's that you look at variables, look at words as variables in the sense that if the word changes meaning, it means the old meaning has been destroyed and lost forever. Okay, so thus they get very weirded out or scared at this idea that we're throwing out the concept of biological sex, which is not what's happening. It's just, if you refer to someone's sex, you're still referring to their biological sex. Vice versa. It's just that at the end of the day, language is more like a pointer. So now we've just reassigned the word gender to oftentimes mean gender identity versus biological sex. But it doesn't mean biological sex has been erased or thrown out. It's just a separate thing. It's basically, what is your bio... Some people will go, well, a man is, basically, you can't change science, but that's not the concept. The concept of gender identity is not rooted necessarily in your biology and the science of things. It's more of a sort of how you feel and how do you live your life to live the highest quality of your life, okay? Because basically, when you're in a world where material need and struggle is no longer the primary concern, then the secondary concern becomes, or your new primary concern becomes, in this situation where scarcity isn't my number one concern, I can put a roof over my head, I can learn the skills I need to put food on the table. How do I live a happy life? Okay, and for some people, the way they want to present themselves plays a role in that. Does that mean it plays a role for you? Or does it mean you have to embrace it and love it and think it's the greatest thing in the world? Not necessarily. But does it also mean you have to disparage what other people may prefer or what makes them happy? I hope that you would be more considerate to think, you know what? I'll let them do their thing. I want to do my thing. In the same way that, if there's something that about you that bothers them, that they should be courteous to you. Problem is, people oftentimes look at every other people's lives through the framework of what they think their life should be. Okay. Problem is, when I take a look at other people's lives, I'm not looking at. I avoid to look at through the lens of how I think my life should be and what I think makes me happy and what I think is best for me, and then just sort of project that onto others. And this is sort of part of what's going on. So to kind of recap, when it comes to the words, because again, words don't have, people say, well, words mean things. They do. They're words, but again, they're pointer variables. They're constantly changing what they refer to. Words that we use today that we act like are just always been that word, their meanings have changed several times before we ever use them. And people from generations ago probably think we speak bizarrely. Words change. New words come into existence. New languages come into existence. Okay, so words don't have any inherent scientific meaning. There are inherent scientific concepts that change, and then even those scientific concepts are oftentimes flawed and are constantly being refined. But the concept, the idea, is separate from the sounds, the way the tools we use to communicate those ideas. And the reason that's important is that if we sit there and try to fight based on the idea that our communication tools are somehow inherent or fixed, it creates this cultural battle that actually makes it harder for there to be coexistence and diversity, so that way many people can live free lives and live the lives that they want to live and be able to participate in society, to be productive and be able to contribute. Okay, because what happens is that when people are intolerant, then what happens, it makes it hard for someone else to do things that might to help pitch in. Okay, think of a situation where maybe Someone who lives their life one way decides they want to go help out a charity, but the charity says, hey, we don't want your help. Okay? Now, they can act on those preferences, but those preferences are at a cost to others in the sense that that free labor would have helped people. Everyone would have been better off had there been more tolerance. Okay? Because there would have been more two-sided, mutually beneficial transactions, mutually beneficial arrangements. Doesn't necessarily mean government should be involved in trying to force people to like each other, but we should always strive for that. Okay? Because it's going to make markets more robust. If we, again, not embrace everybody, but learn to coexist and work together and realize there are differences and things can be complicated if you really want to dig deep into them. So that was a bit of a heady episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. My name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. You guys have a great day and enjoy.